Hey everyone, I'm coming to you today with a super important issue, and I feel compelled to do a quick video about it because it is so important. And listen, my husband and I have been teaching on this issue for decades, for a really long time. Every workshop we ever do, we include it. I do specific workshops on this issue, which is toxicity. And it's so weird to me because, I always say that we tend to agree on more than we disagree on, right? And so when it comes to issues and politics and things like that, if you guys know us, my husband and I are much more conservative leaning. But listen, I don't vote on people or platforms or party lines. I vote on issues. And the issues that are really super important to me tend to be a little more on the conservative side. And this is one of them, right? And this is one thing that kind of brought me together with a lot of people that were more on the Democratic side or the liberal side was this issue of toxins and these issues of big corporations being at fault in pumping these into our food supply and our atmosphere. I used to do, rallies with Monsanto against Monsanto for the glyphosate, things like that. And now it just seems like that wedge has gotten even bigger. But we've been teaching for a long time that you are more toxic than you know, and they're affecting you in ways that you can't even fathom. And so the thing that I want to talk about today and why I felt compelled is because of what happened in Ohio with this train derailment. And in case you don't know, there was a massive train derailment. There were toxic chemicals and compounds being carried in those train cars. One of them was vinyl chloride. And when it kind of dumped out, they decided, and I still don't know who, was it the EPA? Was it the county? We don't know who for sure. At least I don't. Who decided to set the stuff on fire, right? They set the stuff on fire on purpose, calling it a controlled burn, which doesn't make any sense to me. So when you ignite and combust certain chemicals, they turn into other toxic chemicals. And so one of the things that happen is this vinyl chloride, when ignited and combusting, turns into something called dioxin. And so dioxins it's not just one thing, it's kind of a general term. It could be hundreds of different toxins. But what happens is it is the result of things that have chlorinated base compounds in them. When they combust, they create these dioxins. So I hope that makes sense. But the reason we've been teaching about them is because they are so deadly. And they don't happen overnight. Like I'm going to explain in a second, these things bioaccumulate. So this is a set of toxins that are referred to as PBTs, or persistent bioaccumulative toxicants, right? So by persistent, it means that these things persist in the environment. So they persist in soils, in grass, in trees, and water, things like that. They persist. And we're talking about, not just a week or a month or a year or 10 years. We're talking of hundreds of years. I'll explain that more in a second. But these PBTs, persistent bioaccumulative toxicants, are extremely hazardous. And so when the word bioaccumulative too, you have to understand, my husband and I always describe it as thinking of your body as a big bucket. And as you're exposed to toxins, that bucket is filling up. Each drop is filling up a little bit more. And once your bucket is full, that's when things start to go haywire. You end up with a diagnosis. You end up with all of the symptoms. But these things have been building up behind the scenes for a long time. And so just back to the combustion, the EPA, the environmentalists have all known that when you combust, when you catch on fire toxic chemicals, they can produce these dioxins. So things like house fires or people burning in their backyard, when these warehouses blow up, tanker trucks, whatever it is, they're making these dioxins. And so just because this happened in Ohio, don't think it's not happening in your area. It's happening right outside my windows too, all of the time from different things. And so these dioxins are so deadly. They're actually measured in something called femtograms, FEMTOGRAMS. I'm not even going to attempt to explain it. There are so many zeros, but just know like it's measured in basically the parts per quadrillion. I mean, go look it up and you'll see all of the zeros. That's how small of a gram, how small of a dose it takes, and how deadly it is. And so when we talk about it being hazardous and deadly, what are we talking about? We're talking about DNA damage. So think cancer. We're talking about hormone disruption. We're talking about fertility. We're talking about deformation, all of it, right? It is hazardous as can be. And I came across a study. I know there's been several studies, but one was in 2012, Washington State University. They exposed rats to dioxins, and they found that second and third generation rats had the same levels of dioxin and the same effects of the dioxin as the first generation. So they're saying like their great grandmothers were exposed to dioxins, and now the great grandchildren had the same effects. So like we talk about something called epigenetics and genetics in general, but these things are real. And as a fetus develops, this epigenome can be reprogrammed if the mother is exposed to certain levels of toxins, right? So this is a generational thing. We're not just talking about us. We're talking about our kids, our grandkids, our great grandkids. This is no joke. This is no joke. And so we have to be aware of this. I'm going to get into some solutions in a second. But we need to do something about it. Like if it were me living in that area in Ohio, I would probably do everything I could to leave for an extended period of time until I was confident, until they went in and did some dioxin testing that was legitimate and that I trusted, right? And so the mainstream media isn't covering this. They're kind of downplaying it. You had Pete Buttigieg go out there and one of the senators, and they're drinking the tap water. And it's not like they're going to drop dead from drinking the tap water at that point in time. These are persistent bioaccumulative toxins, and they are real. And so think about too, kind of extrapolating it. There is a lot of stuff in terms of food supply coming out of Ohio and Pennsylvania. And sadly, there's like 75,000 farms in Ohio, probably the same in Pennsylvania. And a lot of these are family farms. There's a lot of Amish families that live up there that churn out a lot of food and resources for all of America, really, but their general area as well. But just think about those family farms. They're not going to get help from the EPA. They're not going to come in there and clean up their soil. They're not getting money from the government. I mean, what happens with all of that, right? And, when you look at what is coming out of that area into our food supply, the top three things are, and I'll talk about the first two, are GMO in the first place, and a lot of times don't have any business in our food supply, but it's there. Number one is soy. So soy burgers, soy oils in all the processed foods, all of the garbage. Number two is corn. Again, it's in everything. And first of all, it's GMO, but there are huge crops of corn, like 3.3 million acres, something like that, of corn, 4.9 million acres of soy. And the third is dairy. And so I want to spend some time talking about this because, I always recommend that people eat or drink milk from grass-fed cows and eat grass-fed meat. But listen, if these cows are grazing on glyphosate and dioxin sprayed grass and they're taking in those dioxins and then it's ending up on their flesh and then I'm eating that, that's a whole other level. And there's not testing for it. So listen, even the certified organic products that have that little label on it, or you're getting grass-fed beef, let's say, there is no testing whatsoever for dioxin. Zero, zilch, none. So something that has that little stamp on it does not mean that it does not contain dioxins or other toxins. So there's no testing for it. And so like how crazy is that? And so not to scare everyone, but I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about where I get my food, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to verify these things. And so we have to be super diligent. And so as far as what to do about it, there are two things we always say. One is you have to stop the pollution, right? So you have to avoid toxins altogether. That includes your cleaning supplies, your personal care products, what you're spraying in your home, what you're spraying in your yard, all of these things. So if you need help with that, please, please, please reach out because again, you're more toxic than you know, and it's affecting you in ways you can't fathom. So make sure that you've got to clean up your environment. You've got to stop filling up that bucket. And the second thing is that you have to do some mitigation strategies. You have to avoid these toxins as much as possible. So I'm going to list some things for you, but we recommend some really awesome products in terms of a detox system, Pronac, pro-N-acetylcysteine, compounds from cruciferous vegetables, things like chlorophyll and chlorella, and sprouting. You can sprout your own sprouts with just a sprouting lid at home. It's super inexpensive and super easy. So I'll list some of those products for you. But I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania, so this is near and dear to my heart. And those people up there are just hardworking, wonderful people. And it is so sad that this has happened to them. But like I said, don't think it's not happening to you, because it is. It is. It may not have been that, ginormous explosion that we saw in Ohio, but it's happening at a lower level constantly. So we have to be aware. So I hope this was helpful for you. I'm going to put some links. If you have any questions, put some comments in or reach out to us, and just stay safe, everyone. Have a good day.